Have you ever watched your only shot at freedom get branded an ugly eyesore by a neighbor who never fought for anything but her own lawn? What if that neighbor smiled like a Sunday school teacher while clutching a clipboard that gave her godlike power over your driveway? And what if the second you stopped playing nice, her perfect little HOA kingdom exploded in the most hilarious, soul-satisfying way imaginable? Picture this slice of suburban heaven called Willow Creek Estates, where every lawn is mowed to military precision and every mailbox matches the approved shade of beige. On the surface, it looks like the American dream. Kids on bikes, dads grilling, moms waving with iced lattes in hand. But underneath, a web of rules so ridiculous they'd make a dictator blush. And right in the middle of it all sat Ryan Kessler, a 42-year-old Army vet who'd already given enough for this country. 2 tours in the sandbox, an IED blast that left him in a wheelchair, and a modified van that was literally his ticket to the outside world. Hand controls, lowered floor, automatic ramp. The whole beast was built so he could drive himself to VA appointments, freelance mechanic gigs, and the occasional beer with old squad mates. Without that van, Ryan was just another guy trapped behind 4 walls staring at the ceiling. He'd picked this house 3 years ago precisely because the listing swore the property predated the HOA and was never folded in. Corner lot, wide driveway, perfect ramp access. Neighbors were decent at first. This when they saw the faded U.S. Army sticker on the bumper. Life was quiet. Moved in. Deborah, never Debbie, God forbid, arrived like a pastel hurricane. Perfect blonde bob, pearls that probably cost more than Ryan's monthly disability check, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Within 6 weeks, she'd charmed, bribed, and guilt-tripped her way into becoming the new HOA president. Door-to-door visits, homemade cookies laced with passive aggression, and a neighborhood app post titled, "Let's keep Willow Creek beautiful together." She even wore a little sash at the first board meeting like she'd been elected prom queen. Ryan watched from his porch, sipping coffee, already sensing the storm. The first time she knocked, Ryan rolled to the door in his chair. Deborah's gaze slid straight past him to the van like it was a crime scene. "Oh, Ryan, honey," she cooed in that syrupy southern drawl. "We're just so grateful for your service. But community standards, you understand. That vehicle is a bit industrial for our aesthetic." Ryan kept his voice even. "Appreciate the thought, Deborah. HOA rules." "Never was. Twice before I bought." She blinked once, slow, like a snake deciding whether to strike. "Well, we'll just have to see about updating those old exemptions, won't we? For the children, of course. Can't have property values suffering." She patted his shoulder like he was a confused puppy and floated away on her cloud of entitlement. That should have been the warning shot. Salvo of the most absurd war Ryan had ever fought, and he'd fought in actual wars. A week later the note started. Wiper blade, typed in perfect Times New Roman. Oversized vehicles must be garaged or removed for curb appeal. "Thank you for your cooperation, Willow Creek HOA." Ryan laughed once, short and sharp. "No garage. No way." Neatly, and filed it in a folder, he quietly started labeling Deborah's greatest hits. The second note called the van a commercial eyesore. The third suggested he consider public transportation like everyone else. Ryan read that one aloud to his empty kitchen and actually snorted. Public transport? For a guy who couldn't stand long enough to board a bus? Black humor at its finest. Karen logic so twisted it looped back into comedy. He waited, always recording on low whenever he rolled outside. Because Ryan had learned the hard way in the military, never fire first, but always know exactly where the enemy is. He wasn't the hothead the neighborhood gossips were starting to whisper about after Deborah's casual coffee chats. No, he was the guy who'd wait until the noose was tight, then cut it with paperwork. 2 weeks in, the tow truck showed up at dawn. Ryan was just finishing his morning coffee when the rumble woke him. He rolled out fast, heart hammering, to find the hook already latched under his van's frame. The driver looked embarrassed. "Got a work order, sir." Plaint. Ryan's voice stayed calm, almost gentle. "Driver, this van moved 2 hours ago." "I drove it to the VA." It's still warm. Then Deborah appeared, clipboard in hand, pearls gleaming in the sunrise like some deranged angel of bureaucracy. Ryan, dear, you were warned repeatedly. The neighborhood simply cannot tolerate visual pollution. Ryan tilted his head. Visual pollution? Lady, this van is ADA compliant and protected under federal law. You just called in a false tow on private property you don't own. Smile for the camera. I've been recording since you walked up. The driver's face went pale. Cracked for half a second, just long enough for Ryan to see the fear flicker behind her eyes. The tow truck left empty. That night, the neighborhood app exploded. About protecting our community from selfish elements and thinking of the resale value for families. Neighbors who'd never spoken to Ryan suddenly liked her post. One even commented, "That van looks like a tank. Scares my kids." Ryan read it all in silence, folder growing thicker. He wasn't angry anymore. Way that makes you laugh while your blood boils. Because Deborah Harrington, Queen of Willow Creek, had just made the biggest mistake of her petty little life. She'd underestimated the quiet guy in the wheelchair. The wheel boot arrived next. Like a prisoner, bright yellow clamp locked around the tire with a tag claiming HOA enforcement violation. Ryan stared at it for a long minute, then pulled out his phone and called the non-emergency line while recording. When the cops arrived, they took one look, listened to Ryan's calm explanation, and turned to Deborah, who'd magically appeared again like a bad penny. "Ma'am," the officer said, biting back a grin. "You hired a private company to boot a vehicle on private property you have zero jurisdiction over. That's not enforcement, that's theft with extra steps." Deborah sputtered about community standards and the greater good. The officer just shook his head. "Greater good doesn't override the ADA or the Fair Housing Act, ma'am." The boot came off. Deborah stormed away, but not before Ryan caught her muttering under her breath, "This isn't over." Oh, but it was for her. Ryan's folder was now a small novel. Timestamps, recordings, screenshots, the police reports. He'd stayed patient, stayed silent in public, let her dig her own pastel grave. But now he called the Veterans Legal Aid Hotline. Within days, a sharp young lawyer named Elena was on the case. "This is textbook disability harassment," she told him. "We're going straight to HUD." Ryan smiled for the first time in weeks. Good. Full tour of federal consequences. The investigation started quietly, on doors. Neighbors suddenly remembered Deborah's casual comments about how Ryan was milking the system and refusing to integrate. One lady even admitted Deborah had offered free pool passes to anyone who signed her petition against the van. The absurdity piled up like bad HOA fines. Ryan kept rolling through his days, van parked right where it belonged, waving at the same neighbors who'd liked Deborah's posts. The whisper campaign turned into nervous glances. Deborah's perfect hair started looking a little less perfect. She began avoiding eye contact at the mailbox. The Queen was sweating. Then came the HOA emergency meeting, the one Deborah called to address the ongoing aesthetic crisis. She stood at the front in her signature pearls, voice dripping honey. "We simply cannot allow one individual to lower our standards for everyone else. Think of the children." Ryan rolled in late, folder on his lap, phone recording. The room went dead quiet, smiling like a shark. When Deborah spotted them, her voice hitched. "This is private board business," Elena cut in smooth as silk. "Actually, federal investigators would love to hear your definition of private when it involves ADA violations." The room erupted in murmurs, but it looked painted on with cheap lipstick. "You're blowing this out of proportion. It's just a van." Ryan finally spoke, voice low and steady. "It's my legs, Deborah. Same freedom I bought with pieces of my body you'll never have to worry about. And you tried to steal it because it didn't match your beige fantasy." The silence after that was so thick you could hear pearls clinking as Deborah's hands shook. The HUD findings dropped 6 weeks later like a bomb. Violations confirmed. $25,000. The HOA forced to rewrite every rule that smelled of discrimination. Ryan's legal fees paid in full plus a settlement check big enough to upgrade the van's ramp to the fancy one he'd always wanted. The neighborhood app went strangely silent. Deborah's For the Children posts vanished. And then, one crisp fall morning, a moving truck appeared in her driveway. She was gone by sunset, new address somewhere far away where hopefully nobody had a driveway big enough for a van. Ryan watched from his porch as the truck pulled out, then sitting proudly in its usual spot, ramp gleaming in the sun. He raised his coffee mug in a quiet toast to no one and everyone. The Queen had abdicated. But the real cherry on top came months later. The new HOA president, a quiet retired teacher who actually read the updated bylaws, sent Ryan a handwritten note. Not a demand. "We got carried away," it read. "Thank you for reminding us what community actually means." Ryan pinned it on his fridge next to the HUD letter. Every time he rolled past it, he felt that deep, dark satisfaction, the kind that makes you chuckle at 2 a.m., remembering Deborah's face when the fine was read aloud. Neighbors who'd sided with her started waving again, awkward but genuine. One even admitted over the fence, "Man, she had us all convinced you were the problem." Turns out the real eyesore was the clipboard. Ryan just grinned. Took a while to see it, huh? Black humor at its finest. The same people who'd clutched pearls at his van now clutched their own hypocrisy. Ryan never gloated publicly. He kept the recordings, kept the folder, but mostly he kept driving. VA runs, mechanic jobs, weekend barbecues with the squad. The van sat exactly where it belonged, sun shining off the ramp like a middle finger to every petty tyrant hiding behind standards. And every time he hit the hand controls and felt that smooth roll forward, he remembered Deborah's parting words at the final hearing. "You'll regret this." He hadn't. Not for 1 second. Willow Creek looked the same on the outside. Beige mailboxes, perfect lawns, but something fundamental had shifted. The unspoken rule now was simple. Mess with the quiet guy who's already survived hell, and you might just end up moving trucks in the middle of the night while the whole block watches. Ryan Kessler rolled on, free as the day he earned that van. Because sometimes the real heroes aren't the ones shouting. They're the ones who smile, document, and wait for the clipboard queens to hang themselves with their own ridiculous rules. And that, folks, is how one disabled vet turned a driveway standoff into the most satisfying HOA takedown you'll ever hear. People like Deborah count on you being too tired, too polite, or too scared to push back. They wrap their power trips in pastel concern and think of the children slogans while trampling the very freedoms veterans fought for. But here's the lazy truth. Document everything, know your rights, and let the law do the heavy lifting. Stand your ground, even when the neighborhood turns, and watch the tyrants fold. Sometimes the good guys don't just win. They park right where they damn well please.